This is our first event that we're doing in 2020. I'm Sam Wong, I'm a partner of Blackbird Ventures. So we're a venture capital fund, originally based in Australia, now have an office here in New Zealand. We closed a 30 mil fund at the end of last year, purely to invest in New Zealand's most ambitious founders. And I guess one of our core values is we believe that the most helpful people to founders are other founders and operators who have been operating at coal faces of startups. And one of the reasons why we organised the event today is that one of our newest employees, Clark, was exactly that kind of person. He was at Atlassian and helped work directly with the co-CEOs, Mike and Scott, to scale them to 38 billion on NASDAQ and 3,500 employees. And we thought that would yield some useful tidbits for you guys. I guess maybe a starting point would be like, who here is a founder? Awesome, our marketing is working. Who here feels like they're doing more than one job? And who here feels they have more hours in the day to do those jobs with? Oh, excellent. Well, this is not going to be useful for you. This is for people who want to get more out of the very limited time you have to do the many jobs that founders have to do. So please give a very warm welcome to Clark.
Thanks, Sam. All right, can everyone hear me? All right, this didn't work when I clipped it in, so I'll have to awkwardly hold it. I don't think I can take the full credit for the $38 billion at Atlassian, but maybe 20, we'll see. My name's Clark Carter. I'm the head of operations, head of productivity at Blackbird Ventures. What is a head of productivity and what do I do? My role is to come up with processes to help everyone at the company get more stuff done with less effort. Be it less admin or just getting more bang for their buck, or knowing which things to work on and which things to say no to, and sometimes rousing on people when they're spending their time where they shouldn't be. Before Blackbird, as Sam mentioned, I worked at Atlassian, where I helped one of the founders, Mike Cannon-Brooks, scale the way he operates. So it's a very similar role to what I'm doing at Blackbird, but it was for one person, and anything that worked for Mike, Scott would try to copy, and we'd sort of work outwards from there. So I would incubate a lot of productivity ideas with Mike. Before Atlassian, this is sort of how I spent most of my 20s. Doesn't look very productive. Going on adventures, spending months walking across vast tracts of wilderness. And the reason that I think the decade or so I spent being an adventurer is relevant to productivity for two reasons. One, going on an expedition is a little bit like running a company. There's a lot of ups and downs, a lot of challenges. You've got a big goal in mind. You've got to be really good at execution, at planning, and if you're not very good at some of those things, there are some pretty big consequences. Big consequences with adventuring. And the other thing is that it's really hard. Like that cart there weighed 500 kilograms, and the mud I'm dragging it through went on for about 20 kilometers. So I would be willing to take any efficiency gains I could get, as small as they were. Yes, I snapped my toothbrush in half to save the couple of grams. Didn't do too well because it still weighed 500 kilos. So what I'll cover today, I've kind of split the talk into two main chunks. Getting organised and then staying organised once you're there. And then there'll be plenty of time at the end for a Q&A. But please yell out with questions along the way. I'd be happy to answer as we go along. But first, let's talk a little bit about productivity and what this means and why we should care about it. This is my favourite definition by Ray Dalio in his book Principles. And he says productivity is about getting the most out of each hour of time and each unit of effort. And to me that means don't work harder, work smarter, and get more bang for your buck out of each thing that you do. There's a few other ways that you can kind of say that. Productivity is around getting more stuff done with less effort. It's about doing more meaningful work and less non-meaningful work. Maybe it's around just not drowning in the to-dos every single day. About doing more in the same amount of time, and about moving from a reactive state where you're constantly putting out fires to being in a proactive state where your time is in your control. I just want to stop here for a sec and put it to everyone in the audience. What does productivity mean to you? Have you got anything to add to that list? Just put your hand up if you've got something.
Timely progress, value.
So it's around value with how you spend your time?
I think it's something like action over debate.
Yeah, definitely. I'm one of those people who get frustrated in a meeting when everyone's going around in a circle and you're not making any decisions. Anyone else? Yeah?
Doing the right thing, because some things you don't actually really need to do, so prioritising around those.
Yeah, prioritisation.
Focusing on the skyscrapers, so on the maybe little tasks which have a big impact.
Yep, that's a good one too. Yeah. So, like with all of those things, sorry.
That's okay.
What was your one?
It was just focusing on actions that lead you towards your goal.
Yeah, focusing on the big picture and what will move you towards that, definitely. And like I spend a lot of time trying to distill all of these down into what it really means, and it seems at a high level, productivity is around doing more of some stuff and less of other stuff. And why should we even care about trying to get more productive? This quote, I won't read the whole thing, but it really does sum it up for me. It's around time. You know, you can't make more hours in the day. You can't just brute force your way into getting more stuff done. So it's around being more efficient with how you spend your time and really valuing your time. It's a fixed variable. I actually have experimented with 25-hour days in the Arctic with 24-hour sunlight, so you can do that. I'd be happy to chat about that another time. Long story short, it doesn't work. So yeah, you just need to be a bit smarter with how you spend your time, and that's what productivity is for me. So let's just talk a bit about how to get organised in the first place before moving on to staying organised. So you can tell I love definitions. Here's my definition of being organised. It's knowing where to spend your time, and then using systems to make that easy. Because if you don't know where to spend your time, then you're just running around being super reactive and not getting a lot done. And systems are how you make that an easy task. So how do you know where to spend your time? This is my recipe. 4 easy steps. You've got to set goals. If you don't know what it is you want to achieve, it's really hard to figure out what to work on. So be very explicit about your goals and figuring those out. But not every goal is created equally. You can't just sort of list all your goals and say, I want to achieve all of these. Some are big, some are small, some are super important deal breakers, other things are nice to have. So make sure that you take that list and prioritise them. And the reason this is super important and a lot harder than it sounds is because if you get to a state where you can't do all of the things, you've got to make that hard decision about what thing to stop doing. And prioritising makes that super easy to just take the bottom things out, because if you prioritise ahead of time, that decision becomes very easy to make. Break it down. If your goals are too big, they get very hard to see the same to-do on your list for 6 months in a row. I find breaking projects down into like 1 month chunks is a good size for me. You may find quarterly sized projects are good, but break anything really big down into smaller chunks if you can. It also helps psychologically just checking stuff off and getting through that list. And most importantly of all, schedule time to work on those things, because if you don't dictate when you'll be working on them, chances are that you'll spend all your time putting fires out and just being in this complete state of reactive, having your time dictated by external sources and not being in control. So scheduling time to do that work is super important.
You can just see people taking notes, just so you know, we will circulate these slides afterwards, so don't
Yep.
worry about capturing them.
That's very productive.
Thanks, Sam. All right, so we can quickly go through an example of that recipe with some hypothetical goals. So here I've just jotted down 6 things that I might be working on. I want to sort out annual planning for the next year. I want to supercharge our meetings, improve our onboarding experience, maybe make a company wiki, grow the team, and organize a meetup. There are 6 things. Here I've put them in order of importance, with annual planning at the very top of the list, followed by growing the team and downwards like that. Annual planning is a pretty big thing, so I can easily see I can break that down into the 2020 goals, and then at least working on the first part of the year, splitting that between OKRs, objectives and key results for the company, and organising our offsite at the end of the quarter. Growing the team can easily be split into hiring specific roles, and you can kind of move down the list like that, but I've left the others because they didn't seem too big. So you've got your goals, you've prioritised them, you've broken them down. How do you kind of take that and put that in your calendar? This is like an extra step I'll add in the middle, but it's super important. And this is something I developed at Atlassian for Mike Cannon-Brooks, and he found it so useful because at any given moment, I'm sure a lot of you are the same, you might have 10, 15, 20 projects kind of bubbling away at any given moment, and a lot of it is probably stored in your head. Some of it might be in your project management tool or your to-do list, but a lot of stuff's stored up there, and you've got to remember to chase this project and keep that thing moving along, and oh crap, I forgot about this other thing, and has that person been doing it? So this is what I call a priority board. At Atlassian, I called it a MOPS board for Mike Ops. I've got one called a COPS board for Clark Ops, but we'll just call it a priority board. And the way it works is 3 lists, a P1, a P2, and a P3, with a P1 being your top priority, followed by your P2s, and P3s are the lower priority. And it's just a really good way to visualize all the projects you've got on at the burn at any given moment. And I put some rules around this board. The rules can change for everybody, but some of the rules I have for me are that I limit the number of projects for what it means to be a certain priority. So the rule I have is no more than 1 P1, 2 P2s, or 3 P3s. And this is handy because I find any more than 6 total projects at any given time, I'm overwhelmed and I'm stretched a bit thin. So that's just like a self-imposed limit of the amount of stuff I can do. And it makes it very clear to prioritise when I've got my 6 goals, my board's full, I can easily see what my top priorities are. But if something else comes in, I'm like, oh crap, yeah, definitely I'll add that to my priority board. And I think it should be a P1 because it's super important. Oh, but wait, there's already one there. And then I have to make that decision explicitly around, well, if I'm going to make this new project a P1, where do my 2020 goals go? Probably to a P2, but there's already 2 there, so which thing am I going to bump? And it just makes it very easy to move things around like that if you can visualize it that way.
A question, Clark. When you did this with Mike, and things were in backlog and he wasn't going to move forward on them, was that communicated to the team, or how? Talk a little bit about how that
Sure.
side of managed.
So if you have a 7th project, for instance, in here, something has to move off the board, and I just keep a backlog constantly prioritized so that if a space opens up, I can just shoot it into the priority board. But how do you deal with the backlog? And what happens if a project's half complete and then it moves off the board? It's really important to have mechanisms in place to deal with each of those scenarios ahead of time so that when it happens, you can just hit go, and it's like an algorithm, you just do the process. For instance, with Mike at Atlassian, he's a CEO of a big publicly listed company. He's got a lot of resources, so when something went off his board, we would make sure that that project had an owner, that wasn't him, and I would communicate that and sort of hand over that project to this new person and the team involved. You could, I suppose there are several things that happen to a project when it moves off a board. You either stop working on the project, delete it, you postpone the project till maybe next quarter or just further down the track because there are more important things to do between now and then, or you delegate it to somebody else. And it's really important to, yes?
I'm just wondering, do all of those things have the same level of complexity, or would some of them be objective level and some of them be like more granular task level?
Whether a project gets delegated or just paused or rescheduled for another time, the level of complexity of that can change project by project, company by company. Yep.
Can you just talk through your thinking when you're actually prioritizing your P2s and your P3s? Like, how do you make the decision what is actually more important?
Sure. A P1 is something that is super important and also urgent. And it's, well, you know, everyone can argue that every project is important and urgent, right? That prioritizing is hard, and I suppose I try to always break things down into two choices, like just branching decisions. So if I've got two projects and I can only do one of them, make a choice. Sometimes they're exactly the same level and you just have to make a call. And it's handy to revisit your decisions on those every so often and reflect back to see how well you made that decision and learn from it, and over time improve how you choose between one or the other.
You'd use your goals, wouldn't you? You could use your goals to assess the priority.
Yeah, that's right. So having goals at a super high level is something that helps when assessing whether or not to do something. It's always good to keep an eye on your North Star, and if a project doesn't help move towards that larger goal, but another project might, choose the project that helps move the bigger goal along. One of the other rules I've got for each of these projects, so with Mike I would sit down and go through his priority board once a week, and what we would do is see if there was anything to add or remove or shuffle around the board, and then we would go through each project one by one, starting with his P1s, and see and just make sure each project is moving along at the pace that it needs to, so that nothing slips through the cracks. And to do that, this is what each card or each project should have. 4 main things: an owner, a due date, a really clear definition of done, so knowing exactly what it is that needs to happen for this card to go off your list. Because a lot of projects, it's clear to get to 80%, but then that 20% just lingers and lingers and the projects never end, right? And then actionable next steps. Those are key, because when you're going through your board and you just go through each project one by one, just try and tick off one of the next steps each time, and that just means all your main big projects are all moving forward, nothing's getting forgotten. So having actionable next steps. It doesn't have to be every single step, it just has to be the next few things maybe, or just a few of the big milestones that need to happen. And I try to put dates next to those. And then using this, you can see how easy you can take this and put that into your calendar. So the last part of my recipe was scheduling time to work on your goals. 2020 goals, I can easily put some time in to plan an offsite for the execs. I can put some time in to herd the cats and make sure that the draft is finished and then finalised. And I can help organise an all hands to communicate the 2020 goals with people. So we'll just go through that recipe again, but with the addition of the priority board. Setting your goals, prioritising them, breaking them down if you can, putting them into some kind of high-level view of all the projects you're working on so that you can easily make sure that they're all moving along at the pace you need, and then schedule time in to work on them, because if you don't schedule the time, chances are that more urgent but maybe less important things will happen instead. So the good news is that that's as easy as it is to get organised. The bad news is that's only half the battle. And the tricky part, in my opinion, is staying organised. Anyone can spend a weekend getting their stuff sorted and figuring out what it is they're going to do this year and plan out their whole life. But when you come into the office on Monday morning and everyone's firing things at you and half the projects are on fire, your plan goes out the window really quickly. So staying organised is super important and really hard, which I'm guessing why there's people in the room here. And my advice for staying organised is to do whatever you can to keep in that proactive state and not slipping into that reactive state of putting fires out. Remember, time's precious. Don't let it be dictated by someone or something else. Really try to maintain the power of how you spend your time and staying proactive. And I do this using systems, just ways to make my life easier and to deal with that influx of fires and things to do day to day. Systems help turn your goals into reality. This is a fantastic quote by James Clear in his book, Atomic Habits. I highly recommend it. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. I think it's great to have grand ambitions, really big goals, world domination, but unless you can back that up with with systems to help you achieve those goals, it's going to be very, very difficult. So the weak link in that situation are the systems, not your goals. So systems are key. I'm going to go through a whole bunch of systems that I use to help me stay in control, and hopefully some of them will stick, and I'd love to hear if you use any of these. So track your projects at a high level, the priority board. This is my priority board at the moment. You can see there's 2 emails on there. I'm trying to help some of the partners at Blackbird get their emails under control. Optimizing the deal flow process. OKRs, annual calendar, and onboarding. So I go through this board once a week and just keep tabs on the really high level view of what I'm working on, because it's really easy to finish the week buried in day-to-day tasks and lose track of your big goals. So track them at a high level. Again, schedule time to work on your things, because if you don't schedule the time will be scheduled on your behalf. So make sure that you block out chunks of time to work on your goals. This is my calendar. This is in like a few weeks' time, so I don't have anything in there. This is pretty much what my calendar will look like every week before filling it with meetings. And you can see, like, I've got an hour every morning for reading, which to me is super important. You need to be constantly learning, but it's like the first thing to go normally. If I've got a busy day, I'm like, I'm not going to sit here and read a book or this article. That's going to be the first thing to go. But I value it, and there's a reason I put it in the calendar, and I really stick to blocking out time and defending that. Triage your thoughts. So don't try and hold all of your thoughts up in your head and try and balance everything with a cloud of to-dos and solutions and startup ideas and people that you've got to remember to get in contact with. Get it out of your head and into somewhere. I use a really good app called Drafts. Has anyone heard of it or used Drafts? Google it. It's really good. There's one guy in the back. This is really good. It's a super lightweight app that just opens up a blank note. Have I lost? It's off. It's out of batteries. All right, we're yelling. Okay. So Drafts is really good. It's a lightweight app that opens up a blank note every time you open the app. So every time I've got, like, just buy milk after work, boom, straight in the app. Book Frenchman's Cap dates, a hiking trip with some mates. Just get it in there. Ideas, thoughts, everything just goes into here in real time. and then I know it's in a safe place and I can forget about it. Thanks, Danny. So that's what I use. It's the equivalent of just carrying a notebook around with you, but I find this really useful. And the second half of why I use a tool like Drafts is it's just a holding pen for any thoughts I have that day. And then it has a whole bunch of integrations with every app you can ever think of to sort of triage those thoughts into the appropriate places. So I don't have to think in real time when I'm chatting with someone and they say something super interesting. I just chuck it into Drafts. I don't have to think. And then I spend 2 minutes triaging them, sending them to my to-do list or my shopping list or some specific notebook or into my calendar in real time. So get things out of your head as quickly as you can. Don't try and store it. How's that? Better? Oh, that's good. And following on getting things out of your head, generally if you're getting them out of your head and into somewhere, who here uses Apple Notes or Evernote or Notion, yeah, or Trello? Yep. So you've all got a space or spaces where your thoughts live. Keep them organized. This is super important because you want to make it easy to store and retrieve any information you need quickly, and you don't want to have to think about where to put something or where it is that you put that note that you wrote 6 months ago. The system I use is called Para. Has anyone heard of this? I just came across it a couple of months ago, and it stands for Projects, Areas, Resources, and Archives. And any thought I've got or any note that I write can fit into one of these 4 categories. Think of archives like anything that you would normally delete. But instead of deleting it, chuck it into archives, and then if you ever need it, again, you can get it. And it goes from top to bottom of most active notes to least active. So projects are pretty much notes about any of those projects on your priority board or anything that's just currently circulating around. Areas are basically projects without a due date. So any ongoing work, for instance, in my areas, I'm just about to start a new degree. So my study notes will go in there. There's no end date to that, but it's going to be pretty active. Maybe your journal entries or your one-on-one meeting notes, that sort of thing. And then resources are just static information that you may want to retrieve at any point. I've got some embarrassing stuff in my resources. Shoe sizes. I forget what shoe size I am because, well, I'm forgetful. But, I might be a 44 in some brand and a 43 in another. And if I ever, go to buy shoes, I just go, boom, what's my size? Done. Startup ideas I've got in there. I've got packing lists. I took my 2-year-old camping the other day. It took us forever to come up with all the crap we have to bring for a 2-year-old. So I kept that so that we don't have to worry about it next time. Haircut, number 4 all over now. I can remember that, put it in there. So that's the Para system, and it's super easy for me. But whatever system you use, just have something that works so that you don't have to think about where something should go, and when you need to retrieve some bit of info, it's super quick and easy.
Is that screenshots of the Drafts app, is it?
This is Bear, which is my note-taking app. It's the same thing as Apple Notes, but I just like it. Automate. Wherever you can, automate your tasks. If you find yourself doing something more than a handful of times, build that muscle of asking yourself if you can automate it. Who here knows about Zapier? Yep, a bunch of people. It will change your life. Use Zapier. Google it if you haven't heard of it. What it is a tool that connects apps together. It just creates integrations that you can choose if something happens in one app, do something else in another app. And this has been super powerful for me to automate day-to-day things. Here's an example. Zap in Zapier. add to affinity from front via Trello. What does that mean? When I enter my emails and I want to add something to Affinity, which is a CRM tool, there's just like a button to send it to Trello, and I've created this zap, so whenever anything from my email gets added to Trello, find that organization in Affinity. If it doesn't exist, create it. If it does exist, update it with whatever information's in your card. And it just means I don't have to manually do the step of moving things.
Sorry, just with that one. Are they connected through APIs or is it through a marketplace kind of thing?
Zapier connects apps using APIs.
It does, okay.
Yeah. Another example of using Zapier, Sam told me the other day, something that she uses. So we use Slack, which is a chat app at Blackbird, and we have a reading channel. So any articles that you find interesting or books or whatever, put it in there, and anyone else on the team might find it interesting as well. And Sam set up a zap so that anything that gets added to that channel automatically gets added to her Pocket list, which is like a reading app. Other automation ideas, email templates. If you're writing the same email over and over again, create a template in Gmail so that it saves you having to rewrite the same stuff over and over again. Like if you're sending weekly updates or whatever and it's just the same format, create that template. Manage your energy levels. Who here is a morning person?
Depends area.
I wonder who the evening people are. Yeah, there we go. Right, you all sit on the left side of the room, all the morning people on the right. So just know your energy levels. I'm a morning person. I get up in the morning and my energy is at 110% and drives my partner crazy. She takes 2 hours to wind up. But know that because I know by 3 p.m. I'm rubbish. So I make sure that I schedule all my super important, super brain-heavy tasks up front because, you're not getting much out of me at 3 p.m. onwards. So just think about that and plan your day according to your energy levels. I'm channeling my mum here, but a tidy desk is a tidy mind.
Optimising.
What was that?
Over-optimising. Spend too much time tidying.
Yeah.
Time working.
Well, my desk isn't that tidy.
Is that your desk?
That's my desk.
It is.
Yeah. So, I'm a bit more critical now that everyone's looking at it. Just keep it tidy. Like, who here's walked around and just been horrified at a colleague's desk that's just stacked with old coffee cups? Are you the coffee cup person? No? Okay. It fully affects how I work. If my desk is clean and everything's at right angles, I just have a clear brain and I can work. Maybe that's something I need to address, I don't know. But it has an effect. So this is a low-hanging fruit. Tidy your desk, and it just keeps everything neat and tidy and spills into the rest of your work. Monotask. Who here has started 6 things at once and finished neither of them? Yeah. We all do it. And this is something that I've been working really hard at over the last few months, is to at least be conscious when I find myself doing several things at once, or stopping something, starting something, stopping something else. And there's just so much lost in that switch. So really try hard to monotask and finish one thing before starting another. And that opens up all sorts of great doors for getting deep work done, getting into a flow, like building the muscle of completing things. So even if you start small and try half an hour at a time of just doing one thing, it's a lot harder than it sounds, but try to build that muscle. Avoid distractions. Turn your notifications off. Who here has been working on something and their phone vibrates even if it's on silent? You quickly check a message, you might reply, you might not, and then you get back to work. That only takes 5 seconds, but then it takes you 10 minutes to reread the paragraph and kind of get back up to speed again. So that happens a lot more than you're probably aware of, and that loss in context switching is enormous. So I have turned off every single notification on my phone and my computer, which means I have missed meetings because my Google Calendar doesn't pop up. But that's another story. But it doesn't mean not checking your emails and just ignoring the world. I've just created a system around it, so it just puts the control back on me as to when I check my emails or my messages. And my rule is to check them between tasks. So if I've been working on something for half an hour, I wrap that up. Before I start my next thing, I'll just go through my emails and my messages and spend 5 minutes doing that before going on to the next thing. And it just puts the control back with you, with your attention.
Can I ask a question? So I'm just curious, how long do you spend each half hour checking all your messages? Like I get a squillion messages, an hour kind of thing. How long do you take?
Well, I mentally divide any emails or messages into two categories: stuff that's addressed directly to me, or stuff that's just like a FYI or a group thing. If it's an FYI or a group thing, I just won't action it. Maybe I'll just do that on the bus on the way home or something. But anything that's directly asking something of me, a direct message or an email that mentions me, I'll see what they're asking. And you can really, this takes a minute to quickly find the 5 things that are addressing you. Are any of them important? Can I get them done tomorrow, today? Do they need to be done now? And it's rare that anything needs to happen straight away. And if it does, you do it. I use headphones a lot. So I work out of Tasmania in Australia, and I'm the only one down there, so I'm the Tasmanian office. So I don't really need headphones to block out the world, but I find they put on some thunderstorm sounds or some movie soundtracks. I like the Harry Potter soundtrack, that's a good one. Sam gave me a good one yesterday, Brain FM, brain.fm has some cool stuff. Has anyone used that? Yeah, a few people. Yeah, so just some music, it helps just get you into that flow state and deep work if you're struggling with attention, and focus. So music helps a lot, or sounds. And take breaks. Don't burn yourself out. I religiously go for a swim every lunch break for half an hour. And what that means is after I've had a swim, I've switched off, I haven't thought about work, have a shower and I get back to work and I'm pumped again. I've completely recharged. And that means, from 1 till 3 or 5, I've got just that extra bit of energy to tackle those remaining tasks of the day. So take breaks and go for a walk, get out of the office. And really that helps to manage your energy levels throughout the day and just get that second wind after lunch. The hour of power. This is something I did at Atlassian, and we're doing at Blackbird as well. And what it is we schedule 1 hour every Wednesday at 2 p.m, I think, to all get together. We're in different offices, so we'll get on a Zoom call, and we'll all just tackle those annoying tasks that we've all been avoiding all week. I'm going to get to inbox 0 in my hour of power, or I'm going to go through and read that report that I've been putting off, or whatever it is. And we all sort of just tell each other quickly what it is we're going to do, and then we just get to work. And you don't even need to chat, you're just kind of in each other's company. And it makes it a bit of fun, a little bit accountable, and there's a space reserved 1 hour every week to do those sort of tasks. And I find it useful. Sam, do you find it useful?
Yeah.
Danny?
I love it.
There you go. Proof. I didn't even pay them. Plan the night before. If I start my day without having done this the night before, I'm on the back foot straight away and it just affects my whole day. So I've got a a ritual every evening. I'll just quickly go through my to-do list for the next day, check out my calendar, just see what's on, and inevitably I'll be deleting or postponing half of what's on my to-do list, because it's by that time there's 20 things on there and I just know I'm not going to get through everything. So I make sure that my to-do list for the day is accurate and reasonable. I identify my top task for that day. If nothing else happens except for this one thing, we're cool. And I just make a bit of a battle plan. This takes 5 minutes, and it has a huge impact to start the next day knowing exactly how you're going to start. And speaking with planning the next day, make sure that you tackle the worst, hardest, most annoying thing first. Who here has potentially identified their one thing that they want to do that day, along with the 15 other things, and then they're busy all day, they're doing stuff, and they get to the end of the day and they've done those 15 things but haven't even looked at their top priority? It's more than that, come on. Yeah, okay. I've done that a lot as well, and this is another muscle I'm building, is just leaning into those tasks, identifying them, and I've got a blackboard on my wall in the office that I write my one thing for the day every morning, and I just start with that. And if I find I get distracted, that thing's just staring at me, guilting me into finishing that one thing. So, and I find there's the 80-20 rule applies there. That one thing might take 20% of the time, but it's 80% of the importance for that day. So it has a big impact to identify that. And this is the last slide, and if you forget everything except for one thing, just remember this slide, which sort of sums up everything I just spoke about. Know where it is that you want to spend your time. Have that clear plan about your goals and how they roll up to that super high level North Star. Leverage systems to make it easy for you to spend your time on those things, and then be consistent and don't slip back into old habits and getting into reactive mode, because as soon as you get into reactive mode, it's really hard to get back out again. So be consistent and stay proactive. Thanks. Any questions?
I'm just wondering if there's anything that you do with regards to the time chunking of your week, or even your day, when you need to kind of switch from left brain to right brain tasks.
Mm-hmm.
Do you make it different morning, or like what's your transition process, I guess?
Definitely. So I'm a morning person. I do all of my analytical things before lunch. Lunch is my circuit breaker for the day, and I do all of my creative work after lunch. So I just think the day is split into a couple hours in the morning and a couple hours in the afternoon with some meetings, and all my thinking work in the morning, all my creative work in the afternoon.
There's a number of like time management, magic tricks around, like Miracle Morning, and there's one, I forget the name of it, where you work for 45 minutes and then Pomodoro. Yeah, what do you think of some of these?
Yep, sure. So I've tried doing the Pomodoro technique, where you work for, I forget what it is, like 20 minutes, take a 10-minute break, work for another 20 minutes, take a 5-minute break. And all that does is just helps you focus on one thing at a time, as well as taking breaks and managing your energy levels throughout the day. I find I'm not fantastic at using the Pomodoro technique, because the nature of my work and the way my brain works, I just can't force my projects into that framework. But I kind of do it anyway, because I take breaks. I go for my lunchtime swim. I try to monotask and do one thing at a time, but I just don't put time limits around that.
What about the Miracle Morning one?
I'm not sure what that is.
Oh, just get up early and do stuff to sort of improve self-improvement and stuff.
Oh yeah. So, well, I get up early because I just know my energy levels, and I try, like, in terms of that, I try not to look at my phone until after I've had breakfast and gotten to work and sort of gotten my day sorted, because that's just a mental health thing. It's just a good way to start the day.
So just with regards to what he's saying, there's usually typical things like get up, do some kind of movement, do some kind of meditation or visualization, so you've actually visually planned your day, and then kind of just doing that in your head makes it go smoother. Yeah.
Totally, I think that's a great idea, and that's similar to, you know, I don't do exactly that, but I plan my day the night before, and I get up and I kind of, in the morning, I'll look at that, and that works really well. And you just have rituals to start the day really well. You know, one of mine is not checking my phone. I make sure that I get off the bus to work 2 stops early, and then I just enjoy my walk for 15 minutes. That sort of thing. If that's the...
Yeah, I think it sounds like, I mean, there's lots of useful things in all these techniques. I guess it's just about pulling out the good... You know.
And the thing with all of these is it's a really personal, it's a weirdly personal thing, productivity. You'd be surprised, like every to-do list app on the planet is basically the same thing, but some work for some people and others work for others. So it's, out of all of this, if only a handful of things kind of stick, that's still really good. So just cherry pick things that work for you and the way that your brain's wired.
There's this meme going around that the average developer outputs 10 lines of code per day. I wonder if you have an opinion on this for any numbers here.
How many developers are there in the audience? I do not have an opinion on this.
You can do a lot with 10 lines of code these days.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah, it's not about the lines of code.
Well, it depends how far those lines of code pushed the goals along.
Yeah.
And they could move it a lot.
Spend a day removing one line.
Yeah, totally.
Anyone else? Yes?
Sometimes it feels that emails become a crutch and meetings become habitual. What are your insights into managing emails and meetings?
Yep. Well, there I could write the script of everybody's pain points. Emails take too much time. Meetings aren't effective, and they spend too much time putting out fires.
And Slack is distracting.
And Slack is distracting. That's universal.
Yeah.
With meetings, I find like super easy thing to implement is a rule I was speaking with someone about today. If you can get one person in every single meeting is the designating meeting police. And their role in the meeting is to keep the topic on track, call people up when the discussion gets between 2 people and they're going back and forth. You just say, hey, let's just stop that and we'll take that offline until later. We've only got half hour left, guys. Remember why we had this meeting is to answer this question or have this action outcome. And they could be the person who finishes the meeting 5 minutes early and says, all right, let's just do a wrap up. The action items are, you'll do this thing, and you said you're going to do it by Wednesday. You're going to do that. We all agreed? Yes, great, done. And that hardly ever happens because it's not really anyone's job a lot of the time. And that's something that you can make a bit of fun, and it's a different person every time, or you might find it's just one person gravitates to being the meeting police or whatever it is you call it. So that's something that I find useful for meetings. And emails, that's different for every person.
How do you keep time open for spontaneity and serendipity and just exploring new opportunities?
Yep. So I really try to maintain an 80% work capacity so that I'm not at my limit by default. I'm at 80%. And if I find nothing else comes on my cards, I can just go deeper on some of the projects to fill the gap. It means I'm flexible. It means I can take on spontaneous projects if they come about and I've got a little bit of bandwidth. And it means I'm not stretched too thin and I can be at my peak performance. So I just try to keep at 80% capacity as a rule.
Everyone else. So what do you think of methodologies like Agile and Scrum and that kind of thing?
They're all good, and I've seen them all being used. And it just depends on the company and how they're being used. That's something that I can't comment on generally. It's just every company is different, and a different methodology will work differently for different companies.
So use it at Atlassian or?
Yep, yeah, they use Agile. All right, I think that's it. Thanks a lot for coming along.